So college football had a weekend, huh? How was your weekend? Tell me what happened this weekend. Okay, where to start? Okay, I got good news. Alabama won, so that's kind of set, right? Auburn lost to Georgia. And you're like, why does that matter? One, I think that's the oldest rivalry in the South. That's one of those, things you need to know when you're below the Mason-Dixon, right? Like, okay, you need to have tried grits, shrimp and grits, my personal favorite. You need to, if you say you want tea, understand below the Mason-Dixon, that tea is sweet tea. You need to say unsweetened tea if you want unsweetened tea. Right? And if you really want unsweetened tea, why don't you just wear a Hillary T-shirt and plan on, going to hell and calling you a Yankee? I'm kidding a little bit. See here, what else? You also need to know, there's one David Allan Coe song you absolutely need to know, right? Never even call me by my name. And you need to understand that Auburn and Georgia is a huge rivalry. Like, look, Alabama-Auburn's the Iron Bowl, and, Georgia plays Georgia Tech, and that's a big rivalry within the state, but Georgia-Auburn is a huge game. Like, in many ways, bigger football game, I could say, than Georgia-Florida. Florida's like the cocktail party, but in terms of the game mattering, that one's a really big one. So Georgia beats them, doesn't score an offensive touchdown. But Georgia wins. So that means Auburn is now, we were searching for that, who could be the other SEC team to take down Alabama or maybe be the second SEC team if everything goes to hell in a handbasket. Well, the good news for the SEC is everything went to hell in a handbasket. The bad news is there will be no second SEC team because Auburn lost. So now Alabama wins the SEC West. They're in, whatever happens against Auburn, they're in. They're in the SEC championship game. They don't even need to beat Auburn, although they'll want to beat Auburn because of the rivalry and because you want to be undefeated. You want to have the number one seed. And then they'll play the SEC championship game against, who are they going to play now? Is it Florida still? That's so bad. And Florida just decimated by injuries. And they're like the best of the world. It's like hold your nose and pick a team from the SEC East. All right, then we go to the Big Ten, where Michigan lost to Iowa on a last-second field goal. And Michigan lost their starting quarterback for the year to a broken collarbone. Then we go to the ACC, where Clemson lost at home to Pittsburgh on a last-second field goal by a field goal kicker named Blewett. Like, isn't that great? Clemson blew it. So instead of Clemsoning, which they did, they actually blew it. And then you go late into the night, and USC beat Washington at Washington. Now what? All right, so personally, I thought even though Ohio State lost to Penn State, if you watched that game, Ohio State controlled throughout, and then they made a bizarre decision at the end of the game to try and kick a field goal that they didn't need. The field goal gets blocked, returned for a touchdown, and they lose a game that they kind of felt like they had a little bit in hand. Penn State wins, and by the way, Penn State, if Ohio State loses to Michigan, so Ohio State beats Michigan, Penn State, not Ohio State, goes to the Big Ten championship game because Penn State beat Ohio State. So what we're left with is this idea, it's still probably it's Alabama, it's probably Ohio State, it's probably still Clemson, and maybe Michigan. But then there's Louisville, who has one last tough game against Houston, who's not as good as we thought. There's West Virginia, who has home game against Oklahoma, road game against Iowa State, home game against Baylor. There's Oklahoma State, who has two losses, but one that really didn't happen because they shouldn't have played Central Michigan. And you have complete and utter chaos, or pre-chaos, because if Alabama loses, and if now everybody has two losses, then it becomes completely chaotic. Having Your Way is brought to you by Burger King. If I had it my way, the four teams that would, as of now, be in the college football playoff is I go by the four best teams. Okay? And I think your best teams are based upon two factors, and they're equal factors. The depth of quality teams within your schedule and how did you play against the best teams on your schedule? Okay? Bama's in no matter what. Okay, Bama's in. And I would put Ohio State still in. Now, again, I have to remedy the fact that they might not play for a Big Ten championship game, but that's never bothered me to begin with. I have never been stuck on this committee idea that you have to play in or win your conference championship game in order to be one of the 4 best teams. I think that's always been a flaw to me to even make that excuse. I put Clemson in ahead of Louisville because I saw with my own 2 eyes that Clemson was the better team. Lamar Jackson is the more dynamic player, and they still nearly came and won the game, but I don't think anybody who watches that game would say to themselves, I think Louisville's actually a better team than Clemson. And we said this knowing full well that Clemson this year looks like Florida State 2 years ago, where they were behind a bunch of games, and you play with fire enough, and what's the expression? You go and get burned. They got burned. And then the last spot is very interesting. Washington lost another player for the year defensively. They played nobody in the non-conference. I would still put Michigan as that last spot because even though they haven't played a great depth of teams, lost by a point, and they played some of the other best teams in the country, and out of conference, they dominated Colorado, who might well represent the Pac-12 in one of their 2 in the championship game. So as of now, my top 4 would not include Louisville, would not include a Big 12 team, even my alma mater that rightfully has only lost 1 game. I stand the right to change that if, for example, Oklahoma State beats TCU and Oklahoma on the road the last 2 games of the season. I think Oklahoma State belongs in that conversation.